Hi, folks. We are now joined by Paul Lundberg. He is the chair of Vote Yes for Gloucester Kids, which has to do with the debt exclusion necessary to pay for the new East Gloucester and Veterans Memorial Consolidated School proposal that is happening over on Webster Street in Ward 2. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Corey and Heather, thank you so much for having me, and it's good to see both of you. This is a very exciting prospect, but it's also very complicated because of the election. A lot of people are not aware that we are having a ballot initiative on the Gloucester ballot. It'll be question number 3, and it will be for the funding of a proposed replacement school for the current East Gloucester and Veterans schools, with one consolidated school at the Veterans site on Webster Street. So I'll just briefly talk about Vote Yes for Gloucester Kids. That is a group of parents who banded together a year ago, knowing that the funding for this school from the city of Gloucester's standpoint would have to be through a debt exclusion because it is beyond our budget to afford that school. The debt exclusion is something that the voters get to approve, and it allows the city to go beyond the debt limit imposed by famous Proposition 2.5, the debt limit that all cities and towns in Massachusetts live by, where you can only raise taxes 2.5% every year. This allows the city to go above that for this one particular project. Vote Yes for Gloucester Kids was formed a year ago, and they asked me to join after I finished my term on the city council. And so I've been helping them with what is going to be a good old traditional Gloucester campaign starting right now. So on the ballot, in addition to all of the presidential and the state offices, there will be 3 ballot questions. This is question number 3, and it basically says, shall the city of Gloucester be allowed to exempt from Proposition 2.5 the amounts required to pay for bonds issued to provide the necessary funding for a new East Gloucester Veterans Memorial Elementary School. There's been a lot of work and a process that's gone into this project, and there's also been a lot of civic noise about this project along the way, particularly involving the need to use Meadows Field as part of the project. As with any good campaign, it's important to boil the issues down into some basic issues, and there are 3 here for this particular ballot initiative. The first one is we need a new school building to replace East Gloucester and Veterans. These buildings were built 60 or 70 years ago. They are insufficient and inadequate to accomplish our educational needs right now. They have the basic flaws, heating and air conditioning, windows, and that sort of thing. But the main thing is that when schools were built 60 or 70 years ago, the classrooms were 6 rows across and 6 rows deep, and that's how you learned. That is not the case anymore. There are so many needs and uses for space that are different from those. And these school buildings are just too small to accommodate those. They lack all the necessary media connections, and they lack security. There's just not a good way to control access to these buildings. So there's a host of reasons why. The new schools are consistent with the educational plan that the school committee has approved, actually starting 6 years ago for that. So that's point number 1. We need the buildings. Number 2 is that the school committee, elected by the citizens of Gloucester, and the building committee, which is appointed by the mayor, have worked for over 4 years in developing this plan. They worked hard to balance the educational needs with the costs. They worked with the Massachusetts School Building Authority, which is the way that the state funds public schools in the cities and towns of Massachusetts for the state share, which is approximately 1/3 of the cost. The building committee vetted over 14 different options, including 6 different locations in Gloucester, and a variety of school configurations. And they dealt with the specific issues that you've heard a lot about. Using Meadows Field means taking away that softball field that was so lovingly restored by the softball community. and it means traffic issues in Ward 2. And they dealt with all of those in this plan. And the third point is that the city has presented an affordable way of dealing with the public financing of this project. As I mentioned before, working with MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, they, over those 4 years, they have lots of applications, as you can imagine, and this was one that rose to the top of the heap. And so the funding from the MSBA, the total cost of the replacement school is $66 million. MSBA will contribute about $26 million. That leaves $42 million for the city of Gloucester to come up with. The mayor and Chief Financial Officer John Dunn have worked hard to come up with a cost scheme on how to pay for that, to pay for the bonds necessary. And as with anything else we fund in the city, it's an additional cents per on your real estate tax bill. So this cost of this building, Gloucester's cost at $42 million, will be proposed pay for, and this is the reason for the debt exclusion vote, approximately 20 cents per $1,000 worth of home value on the real estate in Gloucester. Just to put that in a context, on a $500,000 or $500,000 home, which is about the Gloucester average, that 20 cents per thousand adds up to an additional $100 per year, or $25 per your quarterly tax bill. In advocating for this, it's dicey to say to then everybody, all the voters, hey voters, you can afford this, whether it's $100 or $200 or whatever. And I'm not going to presume to tell people they can afford it. That's why we're having a vote. Let the voters can decide whether $100 a year on their property taxes is a good deal. I happen to think it is, but that's why we're having a vote. And so, so that the financing scheme, which includes this, this $26 million from the state, which we will not get if we don't have this financing scheme, is an affordable option. And one quick note about the election itself. And I'm a little bit of an election nerd, having been elected 3 times. In Gloucester, municipal elections, which are not this year, but the off years, we have 21,000 voters in Gloucester, registered voters. The municipal elections draw 8,000 to 9,000 voters. The presidential elections, however, will draw 16,000 voters. 78% turnout last in 2016. I expect we'll have at least that and maybe more. So we're going to have 16,000 voters coming to the polls in Gloucester. And we need 8,000 votes, yes, to make this happen. That's a lot of votes, and that's a lot of people to educate and to persuade that this is a good deal. And one other thing about the election, as you know, there has been this big push on mail-in voting, so that people who want to can have the choice of not having to go to the polls in this pandemic situation, but can vote from the safety of their own homes. Well, the citizens of Massachusetts have taken that on big time, and the number of mail-in ballots at the primary was like a third. So from running a campaign standpoint, we're not looking at election day, November 3rd. We're looking at an election day that starts the first week of October, when the first mail-in ballots come to people's homes, and running for 30 days. So we have 30 election days this time, and it's going to be a different way to run a campaign.
So what happens to the school project if the citizens vote against the debt exclusion?
We have a couple of options. One, we can get back in line at MSBA and start over again. But getting back in line means, that's a 7 to 10 year wait, because there's so much demand in the Commonwealth for this money. We're now at the head of the line, so we lose that opportunity. But the second thing is something that people are not focusing on yet. Yes, there is a cost here. But if we do nothing, if we vote this down, there's still going to be a cost, because we're going to have to fix the existing schools up at some considerable cost. There's an estimate in some of these studies that each of these schools is going to require at least $18 million worth of renovation just to maintain themselves, and that's not even to improve the space. but just to do the heating and air conditioning and electrical work and the new windows and all the stuff that needs to be done. That has to be done. So if we don't get a new school through the debt exclusion vote, then the city's going to have to go back to its drawing boards and figure out how to pay for those kinds of renovations. And in the meanwhile, the kids who are going to those schools are not having the best educational experience.
I would add that if Gloucester does have to go back to the drawing board with the state budget could be in a very different situation when it does go back there, right? Because of the whole COVID situation.
Heather, that's an excellent point. And that's another reason why this is the right time to do it. The MSBA gets their money from the state sales tax. They get 1% of the sales tax. So they have a constant flow of cash. The cash we're getting is cash that's already in their coffers. But as we all know, this pandemic has caused a shrinking of the economy. So the sales tax has also shrunk. So the pot of money that MSBA has is going to be smaller in the upcoming years. And you're right, Heather, that's going to be less projects that they'll be able to finance. And just one other wrinkle contingent on the vote in City Council, 1 week from tonight, the City Council is voting on transferring the land that Mado's Field sits on from the city to the school committee. We had to go to the state legislature to get that approved because it's open space. The state legislature approved that through the good work of Senator Tarr and Representative Ferrante, but now the City Council has to vote to do that. And there's going to be a public hearing at City Council a week from tonight on Zoom, and we'll hear everybody who has an opinion about this school will have a chance to voice it then. I expect that'll be a long meeting, but hopefully City Council will know what the right thing to do is.
Well, we appreciate you breaking this all down for us, Paul. Once again, Paul Lundberg, the chair of Vote Yes for Gloucester Kids. That is question number 3 on your ballots, folks. Thanks for your time, Paul.
Corey and Heather, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.